Welcome, one and all. It's time. The Andy and Rem Show. 204 episodes. Only took us, I don't know how many months to get from 203 to 204, but we're here. We mean business. It hasn't quite taken 200 months to get from 203 to 204, but it's not that far off. And I'm joined, as you'd expect, by Mr. Remington. Hello.
Hello, can you hear me?
We certainly can hear you. Now, shall we fill the screen with joy? Move this thumbnail. Boom.
Yes, sir.
There we go. We're back. I don't know how long it's been since the last episode, but it's quite a while. Safe to say you've been on a bit of an adventure since then, which has led to no shows. Do you want to tell people what you've been doing this whole
I play in a band called Fun Loving Criminals, and from if we go on big tours around the world. So that's my new guitar. That's going to see some action in, but it means I'm not at home all the time. But when I am, I like to catch up with things, maybe do some painting, and get some games in with Andy if I can. But yeah, it's been a while. But yeah, I'm back for now
Do you mean business?
until I mean business. But I must say it's been tricky getting back to the hobby ways this time. Just had a lot of domestic things to sort out, and
A lot
yeah,
of
I'm
things
looking
to
forward
sort
to it.
out, like playing Total War, for instance.
Andy gets on my. You can see what how many hours I've invested into Total War Warhammer 3. I think from time to time he glances and sees I've probably racked up about 20,000 hours on it. So much so I've just downloaded the new update, the new faction booster thing.
So if you ever tell people that you haven't had time for painting, it's possible that you've just been putting in another 100 hours a week into Total War.
Well, I have been, yes, that, and I've been putting some bits and bobs on eBay, Stormbringer magazines that I don't really want, but keeping the ones I want. But yeah, I think with me, once I paint one miniature, I get right back bang into it. So I've got I've got these miniatures to sort out. These Cybor miners and Cybor
I believe it
slayers,
is
I guess you
technically
could call it.
pronounced Skibor.
Is it Skibor or Cybor?
I
I
think it
don't
is
know.
Skibor.
Either way, they're doing some sort of deal. So as you know, I can't resist a deal,
Now,
and especially a steel deal. I
that
will
should be a
go.
new segment on the show, Steals Deals. How about that?
Steel, yeah. Plus, what you can't see over there is a bookshelf, and it's got a load of Bretonian miniatures to paint and loads of Empire stuff. Well, Cities of Sigmar, but basically, Andy, you brought me back into the old world, and I don't feel like stepping back into Age of Sigmar as a result. Don't know.
Well, not everyone can handle playing 18 game systems at once. Some people have to
Yeah,
commit. But speaking of things that have
yeah,
been away for a while, how about Dwarfs? Now, this article I'm showing you here, 21st of March, this was posted, announcing all the dwarves that were returning and the new models. So we
yeah,
saw like the King
yeah.
on Shield Bearers, but they're still not here.
Still not here.
So it's been a very long time.
Plus, they brought out the orcs, didn't they? But it was all old miniatures, so we got promised a bunch of new ones. They
Yes,
they brought a few old metal figures back, didn't they? I mean, you pre-ordered some bits, didn't you? Did you get the Marauder Giant? Did
I
it
did. I
arrive?
decided not to in the end because I decided I
Oh,
couldn't afford to put any resources into a faction I'm not going to be playing.
yeah,
But that could
I
change
got
if
you.
they bring back the old Metal Dragon Ogres, though. That would test
Right,
my
okay.
limits. But these dwarves
I got
are
you.
apparently coming along soon. The Warhammer Facebook page was joking that they'd be along shortly,
That's fine. That's
but
funny.
we don't know how shortly that's going to be.
So I've been, um, I'm part of the Warhammer Plus thing, so and I look at the Warhammer community updates, and there's just been nothing about the old world. It's all been 40k and Age of Sigmar, hasn't it?
Well, they just did the White Dwarf. Was it episode? Which magazine was it? Was it 500, 400, 500? Some big milestone, but they didn't have any old world in the entire magazine.
Nothing. I mean, it makes me think that maybe they just, were satisfying some old fans, rehash a few bits and bobs. They didn't realise just how big a success it would be,
So they're a
and
bit
it's
behind
turned
on it, you
into a
think?
yeah, possibly. But we've got some other theories about that based on some newspaper reports, haven't we, Andy?
Well, you're always on top of
Well,
the GW financials. So
yes. Well, one report.
what's the Remington report?
The Remington report. Well, first off, a little bit of background to this. Games Workshop has been trying to expand its production facilities, its warehouses, for some time. And there may have been a setback over these last couple of seasons when we've had no, not torrential rain, just continual rain in the UK. And didn't they get flooded? Wasn't there a flood at Games Workshop? Or some pipes broke? Or
A,
someone blocked the toilet,
a couple of
something
years
like
ago,
that.
there was a big sewage issue. Yes.
Yeah, definitely that would be a gamer blocking the toilets there and that causing an issue. But despite all that, Games Workshop is expanding. And we dug out an article from the Nottingham Post confirming that it was indeed expanding. I'll just get the article now. Yeah, so it could be getting bigger and better things from and faster things from Games Workshop. So I
Some
just
kind
think
of
they've,
some kind of new production facility, we understand.
yeah, a vacant building will have to be demolished to allow for the new factory to take its place, which Games Workshop's planning agent said would happen as soon as possible. So I imagine we wouldn't be looking at any new building until sort of 2025, 26, right? Um,
But still, they're planning to expand their production, which would make
yeah,
sense because of the amount of games that they have, the amount of product lines they're trying to keep in stock unsuccessfully, and the issues that
yeah.
they have with international.
So it looks like that will be operational in the spring of 2026, and it's located at the rear of its headquarters on Willow Road. So once it has all those, perhaps it could then deal with the demand for the old world.
Well,
So,
in terms of keeping things in stock, there have been a lot of
mm,
products out of stock for a while, but
mhm.
recently they did actually restock some of the dwarves, which is really weird because
Oh,
they restocked them for Age of Sigmar, of course, even though they're supposed to be coming out imminent in the old world. So I was able to buy some gyrocopters, some more iron drakes. I just realised I painted their metal beards the wrong colour. I'd have to go and fix that. But in
yeah.
some
Was it
parts
the
of the world,
box
you
set?
can't get those at all.
Oh,
It's very
was it
interesting
the?
that they would bother restocking them, and possibly
Yeah.
not very efficient when they should really be taken out of Age of Sigmar altogether because they're imminent for the old world.
Mm.
Very
Well, same
strange.
with the elves. You can't get wood elves at all, can you?
Don't
So,
believe so.
I mean, that what's happening is that it's forcing gamers to buy other brands' miniatures, isn't it? Really, and there's some great competition out there as well.
There's some
So,
competition. There's a lot of 3D printed
yeah.
armies out there that people have been using.
But what else are they supposed to do? Unless they're old school gamers, or
If
they've got infinite time and resources.
Yeah, most people aren't like us that have just been sitting on vast collections, decades, that can just, as soon as the game's launched, here we go, ready to roll
Yeah,
immediately. People who don't already
yeah,
have armies but want to play one of the factions that wasn't covered already, which is free, by the way. And how
yeah.
long's it been now? Was it January? By the Bretonians
Well,
and the
well, how long have they
Young Kings?
teased it for
No,
as well?
how long before they
Years.
released the first models for Warhammer the Old World? It's been a good
Yeah,
5 or 6 months, hasn't it?
yeah. It's incredible, really, considering that 90% of the models were old. Um, so there you go. But I mean, we want the old models, don't we? I mean, especially things like those Imperial dwarves you've got there, Prince
Yes.
Ulthers, classic regiments of renown. But you don't get them. I was hoping they would reissue the actual boxes, with the stories on the back.
Well, that
Um,
might be hoping for a bit much.
yeah, and you're going to have to order quite a few to get a big regiment of those guys. But nevertheless, it is encouraging. And I did hear you mention, Andy, you think there'll be some other Marauder miniatures dwarves.
Well, we've got these ones for a start.
Yeah,
So it wouldn't be at all surprising if you saw some of the older metal dwarves on Made to Order. Maybe not in the first wave, though. Some of them
yeah.
may well be. We haven't actually seen... Have we had a second wave of Made to Order for any of the other factions yet? Have we had two Bretonian waves for Made to Order, or was it just the one?
Um, we had the Lord with the big head, didn't we?
Yeah, that wasn't on Made
Um,
to Order, though.
no, we
Where
didn't.
I'm
We had
feeling these Imperial Dwarves certainly will be Made to Order, you would imagine.
yeah. I mean, you said they'd bring out they're bringing back the Lands Connect dwarves, the
I
Imperial
think that there's a good
spearmen.
possibility that we'll see dwarfs with spears, because that's a unit they don't have in plastic, so it would make sense, wouldn't it? Whereas
Well, are
people
they in the rules though? Can you get dwarves with
know, but
spears?
they're adding units in the arcane journals for each faction.
Ah, and the
So
Arcane Journal for dwarves isn't
these
out.
guys here, this dragon company, they're going to have their
Yeah,
own rules. So those of us that are holding out for the metal longbeards, I think we could be disappointed because they've already got plastic longbeards that they'd be directly
yeah,
competing with.
yeah,
And
yeah,
now, while they have got like 3 different giant models, so it's possible that they can bring back multiple of the same thing, different iterations of it. But I
yeah.
wouldn't
I
I
don't
wouldn't hold
know.
my breath on it. I think they're more likely to release unique hits.
Yeah, there's so much stuff they've got to bring out before they can be putting second waves of old miniatures out. I mean, they haven't even brought out the first wave of the dwarves yet, have they?
They certainly have not. But I'm
Um,
holding out for this king on shield bearers. Every time I do one of my battle reports, there's usually a comment in there saying, "Why isn't your king on shield bearers?" I say, "Well, there isn't a model yet." A 3D print mod? No, I'm keeping my dwarves pure.
yeah,
None of those
I
soulless
get that.
3D prints.
I get that. I get that. But don't they look so good, the 3D prints, when you see them on the screen anyway?
Some
They
of
look
them,
fantastic.
some of the 3D printed armies I've seen look great, but that's people's paint jobs as well.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with them. That's just not what
Yeah,
my
I get
hobby
it.
is, really.
I get it. You're a purist, so, but I mean, that's a fantastic miniature as well. Have you haven't tried out the guy on shield bearers in a battle yet? No.
I have not. But it seems
Right.
like it's just a pure win. It just gets
Uh,
extra wounds.
In
So
your first few games with the dwarves, Andy, I noticed you'd put your king in a big Death Star unit, and everyone, especially me, would just simply avoid it.
yes,
But the more recent battle reports I've been watching, Andy, your dwarf lords have been getting in the action, and it's good to see. So you've done that with smaller units, haven't you, to make them a bit more, you
yes.
know,
I've been putting the king mostly in with iron breakers and tooling up with him with runes to make him extra killy and survivable at the same
I,
time.
I, I would still avoid him at all costs, especially in a unit of Ironbreakers.
You
But
would try, but if you want to pick up points against the dwarf army, then you have to go
mm,
after some of the units.
I got you. I got you. I mean, is this guy on a shield? Is he tough enough to just roam around on his own?
That's certainly
And
viable
this
with
was.
this guy. You could certainly run him around on his own. It's not
I
just a
mean,
death mission.
you could have him just protecting your war machines, couldn't you, at the back even?
Certainly could do something like that. I would probably keep him in the Ironbreakers.
Yeah.
I'm liking Ironbreakers and Hammerers a lot at the moment, actually, which is difficult
Nice.
from a list building perspective because once you have both of those units, you don't have a lot of points left for anything else. You certainly can't afford N war machines. And
No, I
hopefully, the
mean,
Arcane Journal is going to give war machines a bit of a boost anyway, because the dwarf ones at the moment are slightly underpowered. Even though I've been running the triple organ gun from time to time, as you've probably seen.
and speaking of war machines, war machine hunters, here's my first Warhawk rider. Well, that was the rider falling off the Warhawk. But
That, is that
yeah, that's a
metal?
Warhawk. No, it's not. It's 3D printed.
Ah,
But what else am I supposed to do? I can't get the Games Workshop ones, the metal ones, without paying a fortune. And I don't think those miniatures have aged very well. Whereas these, they certainly look good once they're painted.
Well,
Anyway,
I
yeah,
can
but
certainly understand that from a Wood Elf player's perspective, because the chances of them imminently releasing Wood Elves, I think that's quite slim. Haven't been mentioned at all. It seems like we're going to get Dwarves next, then maybe Chaos, are the
no,
ones I've
not
been hearing about.
chaos. Chaos is boring.
But some of the models, some of the Chaos models, depending which ones they bring back, are very cool.
Yeah,
Particularly
well,
the 90s era Chaos.
what do you mean? You have Chaos Demons or Chaos
Chaos
Warriors?
Warriors.
Right. The thing is, you can make a Chaos Warrior army with what's out there already, can't you?
You
So
certainly can.
it seems a bit daft. They should be doing.
It
They
seems
should be
like
plugging the
a
holes, really.
faction that already has all its models out there, they should have brought the book back already. Because it's not going to take a whole lot of
Is
work. But it's the whole issue
isn't
of
it?
those are Age of Sigmar models, and they need to create a load more, put them in with square bases, make the new packaging, and maybe not have them
Mm.
available at the same time as the Age of Sigmar ones, if that's what you wanted to replace.
Well, I had another theory, and as you know, in Warhammer, the old world, we have larger square bases now than before, right? On the whole,
Yes.
20 millimeter bases were standard. Now it's 25 millimeter
Unless we're
bases.
talking about my dwarf army, which remains on 20 mil, but they obviously get slotted into their little trays so that they are
Well, you
appropriately
see,
sized.
that's where I think the genius of that decision came from, because if you've got 25 millimeter round models, they can slot onto sort of convertible trays quite easily, can't they?
Yes.
So in that sense, it's a good decision.
Yeah, because
Whereas,
GW have never had 20 millimeter round bases ever.
no,
They've never had any bases that small that I can remember.
no, so taking stock, so to speak. I know we're like jumping from subject to subject, but it's been a while since we've had a good ramble about Warhammer. Yeah, taking stock today. Games Workshop released a trading update to all its investors, and it was good news. And the stock went up by, I think, eight or nine, nearly 10% in the first hour or two of trading this morning. Why, are you asking? Or may you ask? Well, apparently they're pleased to announce that for the 53 weeks ended the 2nd of June 2024, they estimate the core revenue will be not less than 490 million, which is pounds.
That's almost as
So
much as this show brings in.
it's nearly £500 million in a year. Um, and that's up from 445 million last year. So that's 45 million pounds extra in their core revenue. Licensing income of 30 million, which was 25 million last year. So how much percent increase is that from 25 to 30? Andy, 15 is it?
Maths hour with
15%.
Remington. I thought I'd just leave you hanging there doing your maths.
So the group's profit before tax is estimated to be not less than 200 million pounds profit. So what happens to that money? Well, Games Workshop only use excess money, money they haven't planned to spend on other things, and they give it back to the shareholders. So shareholders are probably looking at a tasty dividend, which gets paid out every 3 months. And also, in recognition of a staff's contribution, we have paid during the year group profit share cash payouts amounting to 18 million, which was 11 million last year. So that is what's that? 40% in 40% increase.
Yeah, so even though the amount
Um,
that the staff earn is obviously going to be nowhere near the high up executives, it's still nice that a
ah,
company hands out bonuses to the staff when they make huge profits and doesn't just keep it all for themselves, which is nice, isn't it?
no, big time. If you could find out how many staff work for Games Workshop, which I think is something like what, a few thousand, and divide that by 18 million, and you'll see how much each person is getting. But last year, I think, don't quote me, was it £5,000?
It was somewhere in that ballpark. It was definitely multiple thousands.
Yes. So even if you're if a bit more conservative, you said £3,000. That's a nice bonus, isn't it? Not many jobs do that. They just. I think I've worked for Virgin for a couple of years, Virgin Megastore, and do you know what the staff bonus was for us in the Christmas
Was
of
it a
1999?
box of Mr. Kipling mince pies?
No, it was Richard Branson's book on how we became rich.
That's just what you want, isn't it?
But having said that, the year after, they did give us their Virgin mobile phone, which was kind of cool. But then it cost like £55 a month to run
Not quite so
it.
cool then.
Back then, it was just text. You send a line of text. But there, Colin Mack says, as a civil servant, I don't get bonuses. He just gets spat on by the public.
Speaking of the chat, shall we see who's in there this evening? It's obviously been a while, so let's see who the loyal viewers are. We've got, obviously, Colin in there. We've got Giovanni. We've got Stu as well, legendary figure. We've got Green Stuff Games, Josie there, legendary figure. We've got Tom Wilson, legendary figure.
Nice.
So yeah, we've got all the big hitters in tonight. There's more people
Nice.
viewing that
Write
haven't
something in
commented
the
yet.
chat. Write something in the chat, and then we know you're there, right? Yeah. So, Andy, it looks like that bump in profits. Do you think can you attribute that to the old world?
Well, I would
Just
certainly put
ending.
it down to the old world.
Yeah, just rounding it off. At the end of this month, they're going to give us the full trading update with the breakdown of everything. So that might be worth a look in July.
Well, obviously the dwarves are the thing we're most excited about on the show.
Absolutely.
However,
Absolutely.
the one thing that you're not particularly excited about is the new Age of Sigmar box, which appears to be coming before the dwarves now, even though it looked like the dwarves were going to sneak in there before them. It's now becoming apparent that this is coming first, and this is Skaven Tide, which we haven't really had a look at on this channel yet. So we can have a look at some of the models, because some of them are pretty cool. They actually look better in the flesh. Down at Warhammer World recently and saw some of them in the cabinet.
Yeah. Now let me just say, Andy, I have been looking at the new releases and stuff, and the new models do look absolutely wonderful. But as like as a greybeard or getting greybeard, I can't. There's so many changes. I just can't keep up with them, and I'm worried that things are moving too far, too fast.
Well,
Did Age of Sigmar need a complete rehaul? Is my first question.
I think the old Stormcast don't stand up that well, even though they're only about a decade old. In my opinion, the old Liberators, people at the time thought they were a bit lame and static, so I'm not surprised they're replacing some of them. The issues have been that they've just completely removed some of the units. Others that they claimed were being removed have actually been replaced with other models, though, which is strange. So, for example, there's a new Knight Azeros. So the one I've got is still perfectly fine. I don't have to burn that. The 3 ballistas that I've got are apparently not being replaced, at least not yet. So people may well be burning their Celestar ballistas. But the new look of the Stormcast, I think, is more in line with possibly how they should have been in the first place. And I think the issue is, because Stormcast were the poster boys of Age of Sigmar when it was first launched, and they were kind of bland looking, they didn't have enough bare faces, they were kind of emotionless and a bit staticky, weren't they? Like, even the Dracothian Guard, you don't really get a sense of action with them. And the Judicators with the bows, very static. I think what they should have done, because Stormcast became like this hate figure, people that hated what they did to the old world and blew it up and brought it back for these lame-os. What they should have done, to get people invested in the story of Age of Sigmar, the first edition should not have had Stormcast in it at all. It should have just been humans battling in this new crazy world of realms against the forces of chaos being pushed back by them. So you can relate more to these humans, you can have more character in there, you've got facial expressions. And then when you roll around to version 2, that's when, well, if in version 1 you've got in the background Sigmar promising that he's going to save everyone, just have a bit more faith, hold on for a bit longer. Then second edition, you either bring in the Stormcast or you push it even further, saying, we're almost ready, guys, my golden warriors are almost coming to save you. And you have humanity pushed right to the brink, and all the factions really. And then 3rd edition, suddenly, boom, here come these Stormcast, these golden warriors. They're here to save everyone. But actually, they look a little bit sinister. They're not that joyous and golden and heroic. So I think that would be a really interesting way they could have done it.
Yeah, that's with a 10-year macro view behind you now, though, isn't it? But I mean, we can say that whatever our doubts about Age of Sigmar now are, it was a tremendous success because it revamped Games Workshop in every way.
Yes, I don't know whether Stormcast were necessary at the start to do that, but obviously,
yes, I agree.
from their business perspective, they obviously wanted to create fantasy Space Marines. Just a faction that they're going to have 1 million kits for is in every starter box, and everyone loves them. But the fluff has kind of fallen flat on Age of Sigmar. Definitely for me, and I think a lot of people, even players who play the game a lot, aren't invested in the backstory, which is completely contradictory to the old world, which was the opposite. Everyone, even if you're not that engaged with the old world, you still know bits of the fluff, don't you?
It would have been impossible though, Andy, because you had 30, 40 years of lore, and they were trying to catch up in a kind of a short space of time, weren't they?
The fact that
Yeah.
it was so different and abstract, the Age of Sigmar lore, that it was hard to grasp from looking at a game on the table.
Yeah, we wanted it to be more human, didn't we? And then finally we got, we got things like Cities of Sigmar come in, and it kind of worked.
Yeah, there were mistakes in Age of Sigmar 1, which Tom has alluded to there. It wasn't that successful to start with. I don't know whether it sold all right, but the fact that they didn't have points, they had some weird rules that were mocked widely, like whoever's got the twirliest mustache gets a reroll to hit and that kind of nonsense. But they got rid of that in 2nd edition mostly, and it became more
I think
familiar.
the idea was though they simplified it and they brought you along for the ride, slowly making it incrementally more complex. So in that sense, that worked rather than dropping down this ton of new rules from nowhere. So I can see why they might have done that. But I don't know. Do you get what I'm saying though? I mean, like, I can see why it's just moved so fast, and then I don't know. As a casual player that doesn't play every week, it's really hard for me to keep up with things. And the Stormcast already had one of the biggest rosters in the game, and to now, you know, get rid of a bunch of those and create loads of new ones makes it kind of an even bigger roster than before.
Well, I think an issue with everything moving along so fast is that this is a hobby in general, miniature wargaming, that people dip out of during a period of their life. You need disposable income for this, which you'll often have as a child because you don't have bills and you've got birthday and Christmas presents. So people are into it as a child. When they start getting into adulthood and suddenly they have bills but they're not making that much money yet, it's one of the things that falls by the wayside.
And time, they don't have the time, do they?
And then once they've got more disposable income later on, then they work their way back into it. And if you've been playing Warhammer as a child, take a few years off and come back, if it still looks familiar to you, I think you're more likely to dive back in. You come back and the world's been blown up, and the Stormcast are there. You've never seen them before. I don't know whether that would entice you back in so much, because you don't have any nostalgia for them. Do you see an issue with that as well?
I think you're spot on, Andy. I mean, I remember physically making myself not walk down the street that Games Workshop shop was in town because I'd get tempted to buy something. And so I had like 15 years that I wasn't, I sort of refused to get into it. Not out of spite, but because I just had to concentrate on my music and not be distracted. So sort of between 1994 and 2009, I wasn't in the scene whatsoever. And it's only because of YouTube really that I got back into it.
That's a similar period to when I was out of the hobby, except mine was more like 2005 until 2011. So same sort of period, but then when we come back, everything still looks familiar. A lot of the models hadn't even changed in that time.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right.
So Tom says, I feel like GW is moving too fast, except yes. An example of that is the fact that I have so many projects on the go, so much to paint, meant that even stuff that comes out that I'm really interested in, like the new 40k with the Dark Angels, that's my 40k army. So if that was going to get me to jump back in, you would think it would. But I've got so much to paint. I feel like if I were to dive in and buy those, by the time I actually use them for anything, the rules that I've got are probably going to be out of date. They might have brought out new stuff again. If you leave it a couple of
Mm.
years, you don't know if any of your models are even going to be valid anymore, it seems.
Yeah, whereas that doesn't seem to be the case with the old world, does it? And Warhammer Fantasy.
The old world, even though it's moving very slowly, I think there's going to be a place for your models. I can't think of anything that. There's got to be something. Give us an example of a model that was available from the old world back in the day in a previous
Mm-hmm.
edition that now isn't in the rules at all, other than special characters, which you can just generic characters.
Well, you asked me, so I'm going to say the Marienburg Landship.
However, that faction hasn't had its arcane journal yet.
This is true. This is true. And the Marienburg Landship is now in Total War Warhammer 3. So you had this weird period when Total War came out, where where Games Workshop was destroying the old world, but it was becoming extremely popular through this video game. And these wonderful miniatures and narratives were suddenly not available as models and as a tabletop game, but you could play it on the computer virtually in an unbelievably brilliant way. Um, and now the Total War Warhammer saga has kind of come to its end. It's fair to say maybe they're just adding in a little bonus packs here and there. Um, Games Workshop has sort of got it back. It's almost like,
Yeah, Total War was definitely carrying the torch during this period, the
yeah,
old
big time.
world. So interest has died off maybe less than it should have done based on GW's own action, which is a plus.
Yeah, it is a
And
plus. So, but now there's going to be the pressure is on Workshop, not on what's the company that does Total War? We got
Sega, Creative Assembly.
yeah, Creative Assembly. The pressure's not so much on Creative Assembly. That's back on Games Workshop to up the ante. And can you recreate Total War, but on the tabletop?
Yeah, because there are a lot of factions represented in Total War that are not there at all. And there are others
Yeah.
that are mostly shifted into Age of Sigmar, so they're not planning to do anything with them, and they're the legacy faction.
Well, they were hoping to, because the first we heard of the old world was them doing Kislev, wasn't it?
Yes, so we're still waiting for a whole new faction to the old world. And you would assume that they didn't anticipate the interest for the old world at all. I was there on the launch day, and the queues did last hours, and if I hadn't been at the front, I would have been stood outside for a very long time
Wow.
in the cold. And the queue for the one till that they had open, like 4 hours after opening time, that was winding all
Crazy.
the way through inside Warhammer World and round the hall and everything.
Absolutely mental. That's amazing, though. I mean, Brad, you're asking about, do you think the Dwarf Juggernauts will be released? Is that a Chaos Dwarf Juggernaut? Um, if so, here's a question for you. So the Chaos Dwarves were sort of initially the big hat dwarves of the 90s, weren't they? Well, in the 80s they were more mutated, nasty dwarves, but in the 90s they had their own real cohesive look with the big hat and the sort of Babylonian, what is it, Babylonian or some ancient Middle Eastern culture influence. And then it got relaunched again with the Tamarkan book, and Forge World brought out a big range, and that's the vibe of Total War Warhammer Dwarves. But if they bring out the Chaos Dwarves, do you think they're going to bring back the big hats? Is
I
my
think it
question.
seems very likely they'll bring back the most recent Chaos Dwarf. But that didn't,
Mm.
I don't think that covered every model, everything that was in the range. Because there was
No, it's
no.
pretty big.
It did,
Didn't
but
have hobgoblins though, did you?
No, I don't think they redid Hobgoblins. Did they redo like a Hobgoblin character, maybe? But I don't think they redid entire units of Hobgoblins.
Yeah.
And there was never
Yeah.
anything for the giant monster called the Kadai Destroyer.
No, there
They
wasn't.
never had one of those.
But they had the Fireborn.
Yeah.
They had all the Bull Centaurs. They had a fair. I mean, for Forge World, it was like the biggest range you could get of anything in Forge World, right? It was very cohesive. It was only through Forge World, so I'm not sure how things are going, but I think it's fair to say it's going to go slow if the last 6 months is anything to go by.
Now, before we move on to something else, we've got more of these Stormcast pictures here. Now, here's a good example. The old Prosecutors. The wings look a bit lame, dare I say. These ones, much more exciting, much more energy in them. Wouldn't you agree? These guys just look like they're ready to actually fight and swoop about. The other ones didn't look particularly... I'd say they didn't even look particularly good, the old Prosecutor wings with the long, fragile spike wings.
Yeah, I agree. But people will still use the old ones, won't they, right?
They certainly will. I will. I don't feel the need to buy all the new stuff. Like Liberators, do I really need 10 new Liberators when I've already got 10? They don't look that drastically different.
I'm sure that the new ones will end up on your table in some manner, Andy.
They may well do at some point, but they're not going to be at the front of the painting queue. But the Skaven are interesting because they haven't had new models for a very long time.
No.
And some of the models that were still available until quite recently were early 90s, ancient stuff that you had to pay a lot of money for.
Yeah. So is there a lot of buzz around the Skaven release, Andy? With you're in the heart of it all in Nottingham.
I think there's buzz around them, not just from Age of Sigmar, but for the old world as well.
Yeah.
There just haven't been models out there. And you got the crazy stuff like this, which I'm sure there's something in the old world rules that all of this stuff could represent.
Yeah.
Rat ogres, gazelles, even the clan rats. I remember back in the 90s the single pose plastic clan rat. It was a good time because
they were doing over, weren't they?
They were inexpensive. If you wanted to have an army of like nothing but plague monks, storm vermin, that was going to be very expensive. But you had the plastic single pose box sets as well, and they were the bulk of armies. They didn't look bad in those days. Being single pose plastic, people didn't really mind. And then they brought out the multi-part plastics starting in the very late 90s, I think, with the Chaos Warriors Regiment, Dwarfs straight after that, Orcs, and so on. And obviously they're much better equipped to do multi-part plastics now than they were back then, and they just get more and more elaborate as time goes on. But anyone who's even doing an old world Skaven army would be thrilled to see new clan rats.
I mean, I've had two games of Age of Sigmar against the Ratkin. The first game I had was when the rules were really just kind of basic, and it was a lot of fun. Trying to remember what faction I played. It might have been Beastman. I got absolutely battered though, but I had a lot of fun playing against them. And the second time I played, I got beaten up again, and that was at the TSN Arena, Andy. That would have been with my Gloomspite Gits army, but yeah, I got rat ogres teleported right into the heart of my in first turn, killing my trolls, and it just went downhill from there really. But it wasn't quite as much fun. But yeah, I think if I had literally a couple of years in a room with nothing to do, I would probably paint a Skaven army.
By the way, you've tickled Colin because you referred to them as ratkin, which is obviously just a generic term for them. Rats, but that is actually what they're called in Kings of War, so that's why he's got a laugh out of that, because Colin is obsessed with Kings of War and actions therein. Now, here's an interesting thing. Old World, the gameplay is very different to Age of Sigmar. Or is it? Because a couple of armies that have popped up on the scene in Old World, for example, the Scream list. And there's another list where you take a massive block of infantry, like really powerful infantry, like Chaos Chosen, and then you have a spell that makes them move 36 inches. So these things feel very Age of Sigmar like.
Yeah, I'm reading a lot about different teleportation tactics. It does seem a bit daft, Andy.
Teleporting is a very Age of Sigmar thing to have on the table. Old World, it's more of a representation of an old school, old like medieval style battle with obviously
Yeah.
fantasy creatures in it. And
I mean,
certain
there was the skitter leap spell that the Skaven had, in Warhammer Fantasy, but that was like the only faction that had a spell like that, so it was kind of fun.
Yeah, there's a lot of really
Uh,
fast, powerful stuff now. Big, fast flyers are very hot at the moment, and you can fill half your army with them. So some factions can take two very powerful flyers. High elves can of them. And that again feels quite Age of Sigmar like, as you
mm,
can put out lists that aren't particularly balanced, but they
mhm.
can still do very well. So I feel
Right, so
like they
it's, yeah,
may tweak the rules of Old World over the years coming. So
yeah,
visually on the table, an army that performs well has to represent a more traditional, balanced Warhammer Fantasy army. Not that all the
yeah,
old school armies that did well were balanced, by the way. There's always been things spam.
yeah,
I think teleporting is a very Age of Sigmar sort of thing.
yeah. I had a Age of Sigmar tournament game, didn't I? Against was it High Elves? And it was basically like six dragons. That's the whole army. And they just flew right across the table, turn one, breathed fire on me, and then I managed to kill one or two of them, but they just annihilated me.
Yes.
So it was done by end of turn two. It was done.
Old World, I think you can play Old World. It's going to sound weird because the Old World rules are very complicated, but looking across at the opponent's army, you have more of an idea what things do than Age of Sigmar. Now, magic spells are obviously an exception to that, because just looking at a wizard, you don't know that it's going to be able to teleport a unit 36 inches across the table. That's more of
Yeah.
an outside the box thing. But generally, you look at some cavalry, you've got a pretty good idea whereabouts they
Yes.
can hit you
Yeah.
from
Yeah.
and what they're going to do. They probably do
Yeah.
more. They probably have some bonus on the charge.
Yeah.
You'd expect for cavalry. You'd expect that if you charge into guys with really tall spears, that they're going to be better when you charge
Yeah.
them.
Yeah. Yeah.
And in Age of Sigmar, though, when you look at a unit, you have no idea what it's going to do. It can be
Right.
cavalry, but it might have a bonus when you charge it. It might
Yeah.
just move near you and do wounds to you. It
Yeah.
might be able to run away from you in combat if you don't attack it first.
So I mean, Andy, I could be a new player, and but I know my army. I managed to paint it all. I managed to learn my rules. I go to a tournament and get absolutely destroyed just because I don't know other people's rules.
Old World is going to catch you out less, I think, than Age of Sigmar for not knowing your opponent's rules. Age of
Yeah,
Sigmar has stuff that's wildly all over the place. Whereas if you've played traditional rank and flank games before, then Old World, if you follow the basic rules, like
yeah, so
don't expose your flank to the enemy, make sure you
yeah,
haven't left a big gap behind your lines for a dragon to fly over the top of you.
yeah.
Basic things that you do in any rank and flank game. If you follow those rules, then it's a good starting point. You can't really do that in Age of Sigmar. Everything is wild and all over the place.
Well, here's my point: do you think it's just getting too crazy?
If you're not following it closely, then it's
Yes.
definitely a lot. If you're playing it
Yeah, that's how it
regularly,
feels.
if you're playing it regularly, I don't see Age of Sigmar as a particularly casual, friendly game for someone entering a tournament scene for that reason. A bit like how games like War Machine used to be. I assume it's still
Yeah.
like that if anyone still plays it. If you don't know your opponent's rules, you could move 1 inch to the left by mistake and you just automatically lose and the game's over. Because you didn't know they have a rule that means if you move within a certain distance of something, then you just die. And if you know that, you can obviously avoid it, but you would have to know beforehand.
Yeah.
I feel like Old
But
World has a lot less of that kind of thing, a lot less that's going to catch you out.
I mean, Games Workshop, they have tried though, haven't they? Because you've got smaller games in Age of Sigmar, haven't you? You've got sort of more uh, skirmishing games that you can, you can build your faction up slowly, learning the rules as you go. So they have counted for that. It's just I've got no interest in that. I want all my models on the table. I've spent I've spent months painting. Do you know what I mean?
Colin says Steamforge bought the War Machine IP the other week. Yes, they did. Steamforge are the people that do or did Guild Ball, and
Mm.
I thought that was a strange move, them buying War Machine, because I was under the impression that Guild Ball, they voluntarily killed it because they were unhappy that the community kept breaking their game by finding out what was powerful and then exploiting it, and they didn't like having to keep up with that. And they've just now purchased rights to the one game where that is perhaps more prevalent than any other game system.
Maybe they bought it so they can change it. But Andy, I remember what 2012, 2013, 14, War Machine and Hordes was the Warhammer Fantasy Battle Killer. You know, they were big YouTubers ditching Warhammer Fantasy and going over to War Machine.
Yes, I remember
And
the day that people were lamenting that Mr. Malorian switched over
yeah,
to War Machine. I don't think
yeah.
his viewers really switched over to War Machine, unfortunately. I don't think his channel did particularly well after that.
No, it's a terrible move, really. I
But
mean,
if he was having fun playing it, that's the most
yeah,
important thing.
but I remember these YouTubers doing Warhammer Fantasy content every day, right? And they'd be putting up a lot of battle reports. They'd get 2, 3, 4,000 views per video, wouldn't they? And then when Malorian switched, him being one of the biggest, based in Canada, when he switched to War Machine content only, he'd be getting 100 views. So it kind of dropped down 95% his viewership.
Well, thankfully, on this
Um,
channel, I've been able to put up weekly Old World battle reports, and that's entirely because there's now a local gaming club where I can play a game of Old World pretty much every week, almost every week. And if it's not Old World, it would be something else I was playing that day, so I can report that as well. But
yeah,
the
it's fantastic.
Old World videos do a lot better than everything else on this
Yeah,
channel
well,
at
I
the
mean,
moment.
you've got the consistency, Andy, haven't you? You get the audience are on the ride with you.
Yeah, there's the subscriber spike, the little graph that it shows you of when you gained your subscribers. I took it back to the start of the channel launching and followed it. It was like a steady little line. Then when Age of Sigmar came out, obviously we were one of the first channels covering that, and it went boop, really huge spike. And then
Yeah,
it's leveled off again, very slow crawl, and then Old World Battle Reports start, and it's another little spike.
yeah,
So it's definitely a boost. And any other videos that I do are obviously not going to do as well. So I was at a
yeah.
Dreadball tournament a few weeks ago, and as soon as I do a video on that, I guarantee that's going to get like 38 views.
It's
Because,
almost like you need completely separate channels to keep the loyalty of
which people
each.
do, because if you have an
Yeah.
underperforming video, if you're one of the big YouTubers and you have a video that doesn't do very well, then your next one, I don't think it'll be recommended around as much. So you can actually
Well,
harm your channel by covering things that people don't want to watch.
yeah, I think you probably should. You should split them up. I mean,
People
for
definitely
for
do split
King
their
for,
channels up now.
for Kings of War, it'd be great if you could export your content, wouldn't it? Export all your Kings of War to a different channel.
Yes, or
And
if you could put them into within the same channel, you could divide your own channel into like sub channels, and then people could choose which one of those to subscribe to. So then their
yeah,
feed isn't going to be bombarded with stuff they're not interested in, which leads to people then unsubscribing.
but we live in a funny world now. I remember, things like Facebook and YouTube. I really cared about what was on my timeline. I wanted I wanted nice photos and I wanted good content in the history because people would look back at stuff. But um, I think this generation of social media isn't like that. They just want new content. I'm not really bothered what you did last week. What's new? What have you got out today that I can consume?
Speaking of fresh new stuff, what do you think of this?
Oh,
This
it's an
is
old
the
school
third
organ
organ
gun,
gun.
isn't it?
I already had the 90s and the 2000s organ guns,
Yeah,
and I thought, why not look on eBay? Kept my eye on eBay for a long time, trying to find one that
yeah,
was complete and at the right price. This one
yeah,
is complete, but I chose not to put the scythes on it because they just stick out too far on the base and they're going to break. So it makes it
right.
impractical to transport with the spikes, with the scythes out there. So I've still got them if I ever want to fit them later. As it is, I
Yeah,
think it's a very cool model. My favourite one is the 90s organ gun. I wanted to have three different ones.
that's great, man. I like it.
They're very nice, and crew very characterful, much more so than the modern crew. Let's see what we've got. Green Stuff Games. Maybe even do a separate podcast about Dead Zone. Well, that's a weird coincidence because I'm actually starting a podcast about Dead Zone with Green Stuff Games at some point. That's going to be launching. I think
Nice.
we're probably going to make a YouTube channel for it as well as putting it out on podcasting platforms. Linus says, I've only seen your old world stuff. I just subscribed. Your battle reports are good, so I'll check the other game systems as well. Yes, there have been like years worth of Kings of War battle reports on this channel that are basically the same format. It's just that Kings of War is played less frequently around here, and obviously Old World is doing good views, so I'm actively seeking out more Old World games a lot to get those clicks coming in, more subscribers. But I have actually just arranged a couple of Kings of War games over the next few weeks, and there will be tournaments coming up. Age of Sigmar also. There is an event this weekend. In fact, there was one event that I was at this past weekend where I didn't end up playing because there was a TO illness. So the TO would have had to play while ill because there was an odd number of players. So I voluntarily said, well, I'll just be the spare player then. So if someone has to go home, then I'll jump in and play. Otherwise, I'll just, yeah. So I didn't actually play in that one, which is why there's no report from that. There is another one this weekend. Your Age of Sigmar Fiends. It's the last tournament of 3rd edition. And the one after that is going to be 4th edition. So for the final tournament of 3rd edition, I'm taking a wild, ridiculous Stormcast list that has Krondys, Stardrake, and Bastion in it. So I think that's going to be fun, because they did drop Bastion by like 20 points, which seemed like it came 2 or 3 years too late for my...
Yeah, if you don't know who Bastion is, then he's a Stormcast character that's very, very hard to kill, especially in combat.
Yes.
Because he just regains his wounds back really easily.
The issue was he was too expensive, so people weren't really using him, because there is stuff out there that can kill him before he gets a chance to heal. So here's the 3 organ guns all together. So I have run them all.
I like the middle one best, I think.
That's my favourite one as well, the 90s. I also think it has the best crew, but the 80s one isn't that far behind. I think it's a bit too spiky, but the crew are very nice, especially this guy with the armour plate. I think that's a very cool model. The newest one, I'm not that keen on it. The crew are obviously multi-part plastic as well, and when you're building multi-part plastic, you do lose a little bit of the character, and when it's a War Machine crew, you're not worrying about 20 of them all being in the same pose. So they can be unique, have their own facial expression going on, and I don't feel like War Machine crew need to be multi-part. I think if you put it in just one piece, really sculpt some character into it, I don't think people are going to want multiples of them. I say that, but there are people who are going to run like 10 of the same War Machine if they can. So maybe it's just me being old school and I like all my machines to be different.
Yeah, with the plastic models, you've got to spend more time making them characterful and individualistic. But the old metal models were just characterful, so you didn't need to need to do so much with the paint jobs, I don't think.
Yeah, you get a real feeling of what they're going through and what they're thinking and what they're doing with the old single pose ones. The issue is that if you have a whole regiment of them and they're all doing exactly the same pose, suddenly you lose that a bit.
Yeah. So Andy, you've been a battle standard bearer, if you like, in the old world for dwarves.
Yes.
I've heard other dwarf players be frustrated at their sort of their slow movement, the fact that people can run circle around you. Maybe it's always been that way. Are you enjoying playing with the dwarves? You've had a good amount of games now.
There are issues with them, but they're not game-breaking issues that mean you can't compete at all, because there have been dwarf players that have done well at events. Problem is, obviously, you're very slow. They don't have any fast options apart from gyrocopters. And you could classify miners as fast, but when they come on, it's the old... You always used to talk about the old Ungor raiders when they came in from ambush and then have to stare at you for a turn and just get shot. That's kind of what the miners are suffering from at the moment. You can't charge as soon as you come in, and then because they're so slow, people can just move away from them. You don't have a lot of speed, so you have to force the enemy to come to you, so you invest in guns to do that. But the dwarf war machines aren't as good as they used to be. I think the organ gun is good, but its range is limited. So things you'll come up against that can outrange you, for example, Empire cannons will just shoot off war machines quite easily, and the dwarf cannons firing back at them. On average, a dwarf cannon takes 2 turns of successfully hitting it to kill an Empire cannon, but an Empire cannon takes 1 turn on average to kill a dwarf cannon.
That's daft.
Because they're D3 plus 1 damage, and the dwarf cannon is only D3. And that makes all the difference when you're shooting at something that's got 3 wounds.
Yeah, I can see a quandary there.
So it's difficult. So if you invest too heavily in guns, and then you come up against like the unkillable dragons that have got 3 different saves, then on average, nothing is going to get through that very easily. So they'll just start chomping their way through your lines. If you go too combat heavy, they won't go near you. They'll just drop vortexes on you and shoot you.
Here's a great rule idea for you, Andy, when it comes to dwarf miners. What if before the game is set up, you can put a template down, but the other player can't see it, where you've put that template?
So you have a
And
little map and you draw like where the mine shaft is that they're going to emerge from.
no, yes, or it's a crater that enemy troops can succumb to when you reveal it. So let's say I've put my Death Star regiment of Eternal Guard in the middle of the board, turn 3, hoping for a nice charge or backing up some war dancers. And then you reveal to me where your crater is, and you explode the crater.
So,
And it's kind of like a purple sun, but then the miners can appear out of it as well.
so the one thing that would make that possibly not too overpowered would be that if it said something like, if you have any units of dwarf miners in your army, then before the game, on a map, mark the location of your mine shaft that's been covered up for the battle. When an enemy unit walks across it for the first time, reveal it, and that's treated as like deadly terrain. So any models that are on it would roll a dice, and on a 1, they just take a wound.
Yeah.
I think that would be fair. That doesn't sound too horribly overpowered. And the
miners would appear out and can charge?
If the miners could charge straight out of a mine shaft that you could place on the table beforehand, that would also be interesting.
Yeah, it kind of be fun. I mean, it's great if you're the dwarf player, isn't it? Or it could all amount to nothing. Because where would you place it? You would probably put it where you think either their war machines are going to go, or where a big unit's going to end up, right?
Yes, there's definitely, if they got that wrong, that could be totally game breaking. So it'd be a risky move to bring in something like that. Now, old world armies, it's not just dwarves that I've been working on. What do you think of these? We've got Bretonnian peasant bowmen.
Well, it's very orange, Andy.
Orange and white with green accompaniment. And I think they were on my table for like months. I assembled these shortly after I bought them, which I think was January when Old World first came out. And since then, other units have come along and just jumped ahead of them in the queue. I decided now's the time to finish them. I actually want to get Bretonnians on the table, and dwarves are imminent, so I'm going to rush these guys out. I think
you made a great decision there, Andy, because if you'd have spent hours on each model, you would have given up by model 4 or 5. But you've obviously batch painted these, so it's a good decision because there's a lot of miniatures there, isn't there?
There is. I think it's like 24 of them, and there's even more men-at-arms.
Yeah, I love that jester playing drums.
Yes, so it's pretty simple colour scheme, but it has got quite a few orange highlights. And I think mixing up the colour of the skirt and the hoods, I think, has helped. So they don't all look the same. So some of them have got orange at the top, some of them have got white at the top.
Are you going with orange knights as well?
Well, this is going to be the colour scheme of the leader of the army, who to begin with is going to be the lord on Pegasus that comes in the starter army, who's probably going to be called Duke L'Orange, perhaps. And then all my knights are going to be painted in individual colour scheme and heraldry, even Knights of the Realm, which GW aren't even doing at the moment. But I just prefer them all to look individual. I don't want to be painting 12 of the same knight.
Yeah.
I want them all to be unique looking. But the Duke and all the peasants are going to be in this scheme.
Now, are you going to try and paint your army smart? And by that, I mean paint the models you're actually going to play with, rather than do what I do and paint and get every minimum strength unit of the whole army.
Well, we are quite similar in this
Spend
way,
10
in
years
that
painting it and then realize you can't, you know, a few of them are nerfed.
both of us do tend to buy one of every unit. So there are people who look at the rules as they come out and say, yes, there's a good list I can make. Let's order 3 of that, 1 of those, 2 of that, and then paint
Yeah,
it.
never be like that.
That's not what
Yeah,
we do at all, though.
no.
We're both in the same camp of whatever comes out and looks cool, buy one of them, get it
Yeah.
painted, and then for you, it usually ends there with just one of everything. For me, I put it on the table, see how it does, and then think, actually, this unit's really good. Maybe I could get a second unit of that, and then add another one after. But initially, it's usually one of everything. I don't build and paint a list. I build and paint an army, and then look at the army list in the book and see what kind of army I can make out of it.
Yeah, it's kind of like with my Wild Riders for my Wood Elves. Just a fantastic unit, you know, a real glass cannon. But I've only got 5 of them, and so you can basically annihilate them in 1 round of shooting, and you have done. But if 1 or 2 of them survive, they can still uh, be a force to be reckoned with, right? So then I obviously think, what if I had 10 or 15 of them? It would be amazing.
Yeah, it's good. It sounds weird to say that my hobby is mainly collecting and building and painting armies as someone who plays hundreds of games a year.
Yeah.
But that's what it is. That's the main focus of my hobby, is just acquiring the army, assembling the army, painting the army, putting it on a shelf, and then gaming comes after that.
I mean, the thing is, Andy, I'm worried for the consumers of the new old world stuff. I mean, let's take Wood Elves, close to my heart. When they eventually do come out, the players that are going to play Wood Elves have already bought their armies from from other
That
companies,
is
and
true. I'm
so
sure.
they're only going to cherry pick what they want rather than buying the whole collection.
Yeah, the way the dwarves are going at the moment, everyone in the community is going to have Highland miniatures dwarf armies, which I'm keeping mine pure, but I know lots of people that don't. However, the percentage of people who are interested in Old World potentially that also attend tournaments is probably not that high. I imagine there's a lot more people that collect these armies that don't attend tournaments. So maybe there are loads of people out there just patiently waiting for the dwarves and aren't at all interested in alternative models. As soon as the dwarves come along and are released, they're saying, yep, now's my time to strike. Don't care about playing anyway, so I didn't need the army instantly. So maybe that audience is quite big. Maybe the people who post the pictures of their armies on Facebook, maybe they're not in the majority, so it might look like it's flooded with 3D printed miniatures. Maybe the actual truth is that there are a lot more people out there who just aren't on Facebook posting their army.
Yeah.
So I think there's still going to be a nice sales spike for each army that. Even people that have a 3D printed army might also want pure GW units so they can use them in Games Workshop events as well.
I mean, because the output is going to be kind of quite slow, can you ever see the old world having any new factions?
Yes,
Wow.
I think, yeah, because the Arcane Journal system, bringing out an old faction, re-releasing the models, and maybe adding a couple of new things, that's only going to give you so much time. Although I suppose if they wait 4 months between each one, it'll be quite a while. But I think they'll also be sprinkling in the brand new factions over time as well. I think we will get Kislev eventually.
Here's another one for you. Do you think that they will have the old world version 2 come out before some of these factions are even released?
That would be wild, but it would not be outside of GW's history to do that. That is definitely a them thing to do. There have been
Yeah.
editions where armies didn't get books in them.
I think you might see Kislev by sort of edition number 2 or 3.
Well, a brand new army, I think, could be different because you could also use that to launch starter boxes for future editions as well, whole new armies.
Mm.
So it wouldn't be at all surprising if, like, Kislev or Cathay came along as a starter box faction for Old World Edition 2. I wouldn't find that weird.
No. I mean, what I like about the old world is you know, just forgotten.
You've forgotten what you like about the old world.
Yeah, what I like about it. There's a kind of certainty about it. That's what I wanted to say. They've kept true to it. You know.
Yeah, they haven't made drastic changes, have they? Even to the
No.
rules, they're still familiar enough.
Yeah.
They've tweaked things, and some of those things have led to weirdness in the rules. If people have been watching the battle reports, then they'll be aware of some of that weirdness. For example, when you fall back in good order away from the enemy and you end up bouncing through half an army to the other side of the table. So weird things do come up within the rules, but in general, it feels like Warhammer still.
Yeah. So we said Kislev. What other factions would you like to see?
For the factions, well, we don't have the Vampire Coast don't exist,
That could be
so
interesting,
that would be
couldn't it?
great to see those.
But as I said, they'd be probably drawing on Warhammer Total War 3.
Yes,
Total
because
War, wouldn't they?
the Games Workshop people were involved in the design of those factions, weren't they?
Yeah, well, that could be an amazing faction then, I think.
Yeah,
You've
so
got the giant crabs.
you've got to assume that any of those factions in Total War, assuming Old World continues to sell, I see no reason why it shouldn't, then I think we could see all those factions eventually. It would be more surprising if we don't see them if Old World
I think
continues.
I think it would take 10 years. I think we'll be seeing stuff coming out for at least 10 years.
That wouldn't surprise me at all.
Yeah.
So
So people will have multiple armies by that point.
let's let people know that we were going to actually play a game this week. You've been struck down by
Yeah.
an ailment, so we weren't able to do that. But then you
Yeah.
did say, hey, but I can do a live show instead. I'm sure
Yeah.
people appreciate. See,
Yeah.
let's have a quick look at the chat before we start wrapping this one up. So, Lina says, guilty, I have a mix of different artists and companies for my dwarves. Yes, all my dwarves are pure at the moment. I do own other dwarves that aren't in the army or aren't painted, but they're all GW, all the ones I've been using. Bretonians are going to be 99% GW. The only things I'm going to add, I may well add a couple of Bad Squiddo miniatures. There's a couple of knights Bad Squiddo that are very impressive. I'll probably stick of those in there. And if they, or when they bring back Chaos, depending which era of Chaos they bring back, that could inspire me to jump on that army as well, because that was the first Warhammer Fantasy army I had that was fully painted on the table, was Chaos Warriors. So I'll keep my eye on those.
What units do you get in an old world Chaos Warrior army? Apart from
So
Chaos
you've got
Warriors.
Warriors of Chaos, you've got Chaos Knights, you've got Chaos Chosen, Chariots, you've got Dragon Ogres, Chaos Ogres, you've got Chaos Hounds.
Yeah, you got the Shrine, the War Shrine. That was a cool model.
Yep, you've got Demon Princes, got
Yeah.
Chaos Dragons,
Marauders.
Chaos Lords. Yeah, Marauders, Marauder Horsemen.
Yeah.
So I'm going to definitely keep my eye on those because I'm a fan of the 90s Chaos, but I'm not convinced they're going to bring back all of them.
But then you had the Chaos factions, didn't you? You had, you'd get Knights, you get Warriors of Tzeentch, Warriors of Khorne.
My period of Chaos was when they split up Chaos Warriors from Beastmen, Demons. That was when I got in it, when they had the Realm of Chaos box set.
Yeah.
When I was doing Chaos Warriors. It had been around, must have been like 99. And because the next year they brought out the plastic Dwarf set, and that was when they had the Orcs and Empire with the cannon chariots in the starter box. So prior to that, I was playing Chaos. And I remember the days when Chaos Knights couldn't fail their saves against Strength 3 weapons because one didn't auto-fail a save. Which, someone actually told me that that was never a thing, but I think they're wrong. I think there was an edition where one did not auto-fail a save. I just can't remember which edition it was because I don't have the old rule books anymore.
Now, Andy, final question. Do you think they will bring in factions like Dark Elves out from the unofficial to the official?
That is a tough one. Because, let's say, they do have close approximation of Dark Elves, obviously, in Age of Sigmar, where a lot of the models would be very similar, like Witch Elves are already a big part of that army.
Mm.
So I don't know, maybe over time, if they they may well kick factions out of Age of Sigmar because they've already proved they can just kick models out of it that are only 10 years old. So I wouldn't be surprised too much. Eventually, factions moved and bounced from one game to the other on sales. So going to be interesting times ahead, and I'm sure some people are going to be very disappointed at things that don't appear for a long time, and also things that are no longer relevant in the game that they play and move into a different system. And they'll have to change the bases again. How many armies have you rebased?
That's been the other thing. I mean, I've got a Daughters of Cain army, and I'm thinking of turning that into a Dark Elves, turning it back into a Dark Elves army. It did start off as a Dark Elf army.
You're definitely not on the Age of Sigmar wagon.
Not at the minute, no. But you know, I've got a Gloomspite Gitz army. I've got it's a Sigmar army.
It could definitely pull you back in, but for the old world, the hotness at the moment, Wood Elves are definitely hot right now. They're powerful, but no one's playing them because no one has the models. So Wood Elves are hot right now. Empire gun lines are pretty tasty at the moment.
Yeah.
With loads of cannons and volley guns.
I want to see halflings, man.
High Elves with 2 dragons are good. 2 star dragons. Chaos are powerful at the moment as well with their big Chaos dragon that you can make virtually unkillable.
Yeah. William Matthews, hello mate. He said Lizardmen, Vampire Coast.
At what point in the Warhammer
2 could be launched as the new world?
Yeah, at what point in the Warhammer lore was the new world discovered? How does that line up with the old world timeline at the moment?
You had adventurers that would go over and find Lustria, and so they were encountering pygmies, lobotomized human slaves that were slaves, and the slaves' overlords were the Slan. So that's how they met. So it was like you see it in Total War Warhammer, where you've got colonies from the old world. So pretty quite in the actual lore, it was kind of early on.
So you think it's definitely doable for them to bring in the new world into the old world?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know about Lizardmen, because they're another one where obviously they're a big deal in Age of Sigmar, Seraphon. So whether they would give them the boot from Age of Sigmar first before they make them a big deal in the old world again is to be seen.
That's why they changed all the names from Lizardmen to Seraphon, because they always knew that they'd bring them back to the old world.
Shall see. Armando says, most of the people I know buy AOS just to play Old World. Yes. That's what I've done with all these gyrocopters I've bought. 3 gyrocopters and 10 Iron Drakes. They were in the Age of Sigmar packaging, so on their spreadsheet, I've contributed to the sales for Age of Sigmar, even though I'm using them entirely for Old World.
It's getting very confusing. Do you think they should just package them with both bases then?
Well, I don't think they'll do that. I think they like to keep the dividing line between the different games so they can see which ones are selling. But it's not reliable, because people are just buying Sigmar models to use in the old world. So it's not a reliable tracking method anymore. But have you also heard that I don't know if it's on the box, the new Age of Sigmar box, it says something like the greatest fantasy battles game. So if you were in the old world team and you saw that shipping out, that's kind of a dig at your own company there, at a rival faction within your own company. So that's interesting.
I won't call it Age of Sigmar the greatest. I mean, it's fun.
But the fact that they're calling it that when they also have another fantasy game.
I mean, they've had to change the rules 5 or 6 times. I mean, you can't say that about chess, can you?
It reminds me a little bit. It was a film based on a true story. It was like, was it the early days of Apple company when they had competing factions within the company that were designing different products? And they tried to create a really competitive environment, and it ended up being very harmful to the business.
Yeah, well, maybe that's why they're expanding the factory warehouse sites. Maybe they're just going to silo all these different factions.
Well, imagine if you've got the Age of Sigmar team and the Old World team who are both saying, here's the stuff that we need, and you make it for us. and they can't fit it all in the factory at the moment.
Yeah, I think that's exactly what's going on.
Exciting times ahead.
Yeah, I
Exciting
mean, it's
times.
great. We've got 28 people watching, Andy. One of them's me
It
because
did.
I'm watching.
Don't tell them that.
Well, I
You've,
mean, look,
yeah,
but
but you've
the
knocked
thing
down
is,
our viewership by one then.
no, it used to be 4 people watching us, or
Well,
3.
what was our
So it's
peak number of viewers that we had during the prime time
live.
of the Age of Sigmar early days? I'm sure we got like 60 people in routinely, didn't we?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
And then
and then
thousands of views afterwards. Then there
yeah,
was the dark period where we were still doing the show, but we weren't playing that much. We were reviewing
no,
the new stuff, but
yeah,
I think Age of Sigmar 2nd edition, we didn't really participate too much in that.
no,
We didn't play too much. And then 3rd edition is when I started playing it a lot. But that's when you've become a bit busier in your life as well.
yeah.
So maybe, is 4th edition going to be the time that Remington learns the rules, or is he going to skip it again like 2?
I just got my head kind of around, version 3, and now they've put version 4 out. It sucks. So it might be just a line too far to cross now. But if that's true, then now I've got to rebase all my Gloomspike gears onto square bases.
Well, I wouldn't do that immediately, because you can definitely fit them onto special trays,
Yeah.
and you may want to use them for Age of Sigmar in the future.
Plus, I've lost about 40 night goblins. I don't know where they're gone.
Yeah, you've got some mystery night goblins. You asked me a few times whether I've got them, because you remember bringing them here, and then
Yeah.
they've disappeared somewhere. I've not.
Maybe they're at the TSN arena.
They could be there
Possibly.
somewhere, hiding in a box. They could be under a table at Warhammer
Well,
World.
you would
Who
recognise
knows?
them, wouldn't you? You'd recognise my paint jobs, wouldn't you?
I would. You're basing very unique. If you ever
Yeah,
want to
it's good.
identify one of Rem's armies, and you can't identify it from the paint job, just pick it up to your nose, give it a sniff. Like, is that potpourri? Then yes, it's one of Rem's armies. Foolproof test.
I tell you what, I have been sort of silently collecting, Andy, is some Citadel miniatures, and they're very hard to come by. But Citadel Rangers, they only brought out 12 of them, and they're basically well, they're Rangers. So you've got one that looks like a Native American, one that looks like Clint Eastwood, um, one that's like a woodcutter, all metal, very unique. And I've almost got all 12. Someone's selling them on eBay, all 12 Citadel models for £240, something like that. But over the years, I've managed to get one here and there. Really hard to come by. But those old Citadel metal miniatures are getting so expensive now. Um, it's very hard to pick them up even, unless you want to pay £15 per model.
Speaking of money, Tom says 40k department will be counting their money. Yes. They're never going to be too busy to make more Space Marines, are they? They're always going to jump the queue. Even when they ran out of Space Marine units they could come up with, they thought, I know, let's just make them a bit taller. And now we can just do all the units again. Did we
Yeah,
get a boost in views during the lockdown? I don't think so, actually, because there wasn't much gaming going on.
that's
So I
right.
don't think that did lead to a boost. The only thing that I did that was different during lockdown was I think I did some painting stream that may have got a
Yeah.
few views, but not a huge amount. I have actually been looking into doing that again, because I'm painting all the time anyway. So why not do it as a live stream? Problem is, the setup I've got at the moment, I need to find somewhere to mount an overhead camera so it's pointing down onto the table that isn't attached to the desk. Because when it's attached to the desk, it wobbles too much when I'm resting my arm there. So I'm looking at ways to set up a camera above me so that I can actually do some painting streams. I think that would be interesting. Another thing that we did was we did a lot of Vermintide live streams as well.
Yes, we did. That was great.
So at some point I want to start live streaming all the Warhammer themed PC games as well. Dark Omen's a bit tricky on modern PCs.
Yeah.
But obviously Total War I think maybe is too many hours to put it in. It would be too many videos, too much. I think Total War would be better as like updates rather than here's me playing for 17 hours.
We should do a Total War battle. We could totally do that.
We definitely could.
We did it once before, and I
We
think
played one battle against each other, and I think my dwarves gunned down your army horribly.
no, I think it was. I think I annihilated you with my Wood Elves that day. I think I remember that.
I think we might have had two battles then, because I
Two
remember my
battles.
dwarf gun line just tore one of your armies to shreds.
The thing is with those battles, I don't think you can put them on slow speed when you're playing, can you? You have to play in real time, so they're really fast.
Yes,
Whereas when I play against the computer, I often put it on slow speed so I can get the right spells off, and you know,
indeed. Okay, I think it's time to wrap this one up.
yeah,
But
yeah,
it's
yeah.
been spicy, it's been juicy, it's been exciting. We still don't have any dwarves, but we can look longingly at this King on Shield Bearers, knowing that it shouldn't be too long now, maybe after Age of Sigmar, but still, he's in sight, and when he's on the table, it's going to be fun times for all. And my bank account has been braced for impact for quite a while. It's going to be King on Shield Bearers, it's going to be Slayers, the Goblin Hewer, Doom Seekers,
Yes.
the New Engineer, Slayer King, all the war machines that I don't have two of already. So like a bolt thrower, a modern bolt thrower, modern grudge thrower, flame cannon, and that's just off the top of my head. There's the Dragon Company. Any other made to order stuff they bring back is definitely going to end up in the basket as well.
I mean, they've got to bring out a Bugman's Rangers unit. No,
Well,
I mean, if not a new one, then
I
one of
think
the old ones.
I don't think Joseph Bugman is around in the timeline that the game is focused on now, but they could definitely bring back
Oh,
the Rangers unit as just standard Rangers, perhaps, because they haven't
yeah.
actually got a Rangers kit. They haven't had one for a while because Bugman's Rangers weren't available even like 12 or so years ago when they had the last batch of dwarves 10 years
No,
ago.
that's right.
I don't think
That's
you could
right.
buy Bugman's Rangers at that point, but
No.
they were still in the rules as Rangers.
Yeah.
We'll see. Be interesting. Slayers are hopefully going to be good with the Arcane Journal because they're not very good at the moment.
No, they're not. I mean, the way to remedy the Slayer problem is to give them better movement,
Better
because
movement
you
and
got
a
no
ward
armor.
save against a ward
Give
save in the
movement
shooting
5.
phase.
Would you give them movement 5 or movement 4?
Movement 4
Move,
because they're still dwarves, but even if you keep them movement 3, give them some way of getting up there. Maybe give them, I don't know about Swift Stride, but give them some way of getting to the enemy
yes,
faster
that's
and
easy. Yes.
give them a ward save in the shooting phase so they don't just get shot with arrows and killed before they fight anything.
Yeah, but then they get tattoo saves.
At the moment, they don't have a ward save, so I've missed it.
Huh. I would have thought Slayer's always had a tattoo
So
save.
they are decent at fighting, as Ice Wolf has mentioned there. Let's see, always been on 4 plus.
Yeah,
Yeah, Slayers do have rules for wounding big stuff quite well.
they're just not going to get into combat though, are
No,
they?
they're not
They're
going to
just
get
going
to
to get
fight
shot
because they'll all
down,
be dead,
and they're not going to
unfortunately.
get to hit first either. So
So hopefully they get a boost. Yes, there are a few Bugman models at Warhammer World. The actual Bugman himself is available at Warhammer World, but
yeah,
his Rangers are not,
yeah.
unfortunately. But the old Bugman is still in there, in their the special section where they have all the other, like the White Dwarf models and commemorative.
Here's one for you, Andy. I've got a musician friend contacted me and on Instagram, and he said, "Got this old box from my old Warhammer collection, and got no interest in it now. I was going to take it to a charity shop, um, but I'm just checking if you want it." I says, "Yeah, what is it?" He took a little video of it, and it was the Regiment of Renown Nightmare Legion
Oh, is that one that
original
you
box.
don't have as well?
I used to have it, and then I sold it because the miniatures themselves are actually pretty terrible. But if you don't know, the Nightmare Legion is like a legion, a unit of skeletons. You know, so if you're into vampire counts or whatnot, they're quite highly sought after because they're obviously collectors models. But when I looked, but I said yes, send it absolutely. But they'll like sell for like 100 to 200 pounds on eBay with
Now,
the original box.
I hope you're
It
going to
was
paint them up and give them the home they deserve rather than taking that gift and immediately selling it.
yeah, we'll see, eh? We'll see. He's
We'll,
still
we'll
not
see if
sent
that
it
comes
though.
up
That
in
was
one
like
of
a month ago.
Steele's deals in the future. Here's a
Steals
great idea, folks. You receive a present and then sell it. It's like an infinite money hack from Remington. It's like, what was it? On the last show, I'm pretty sure it was, that you had that.
Regift.
What was the other thing you were doing with Amazon? You had some other
Amazon.
devious money-making scheme. I'm sure, wasn't it Amazon related?
No, I've never sold anything on
No,
Amazon.
you didn't sell something. You had some other scheme going. I'd have to go back and watch the episode, but I remember we were mocking you mercilessly. Oh yeah, you said that you would never sell out, except for, and then you then listed a load of things that you've done that are basically selling out. So yeah, anyone go back and watch the previous episode to find evidence of Remington admitting
Oh,
to selling out on camera.
you can say I'm a Gemini. There's two of us here.
But we don't sell out on this channel, and let's have a look
That's
at the
why you have
thumbnail.
adverts cutting in every 2 seconds.
Yes, I'm definitely selling out. Yeah, so if people want to send me money so I can buy more dwarfs, then there is a Patreon and a PayPal link down there, obviously, which goes straight into the dwarf fund so that I can buy even more slayers when they come out. And apart from that, any final parting words, Mr. Remington, until next time?
No, but I will see you next time because if I'm back, you'll see me.
That is true. And people will also see me, and probably see me playing Old World, and maybe even at some Old World events if anyone in the chat is attending those, especially those in and around Nottingham. And
we definitely need new profile pictures there, Andy, because I no longer have long hair, and
yes,
you do have long hair.
yes, my hair needs lengthening in that photo. Yeah, we'll have to sort that out for next time. Maybe one of these days we'll get a new intro video done as well. Wouldn't that be wild?
Well,
So,
I need a new
everyone,
computer so I can actually make some new music.
thanks for tuning in, everyone. Don't forget to check out all the links in the description, obviously. Don't forget to like if you haven't for some reason, and subscribe. And there'll be more succulent, juicy content coming towards you. The one thing that we didn't cover on this show is I took some pictures when I was a spare player at an Old World event the other day. But I think we can go through those on the next show, because obviously it's getting late now. So, all that remains to be said at this point in the evening is good night out there, whatever you are.